Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm Steve Lance. Former President Trump has revealed more details about the circumstances surrounding the FBI's Monday raid of his Mar-a-Lago home. He says in early June, the DOJ and FBI asked him to put an extra lock on the door leading to where boxes are stored in Mar-a-Lago. Trump says they agreed, according to a post on Truth Social Wednesday. Trump's lawyer, Christina Bobb, told the Epoch Times that the FBI had full access to the storage area back in June.
They had access to it anyway. Nothing had been hidden and nothing had been kept secret from them, which makes this all the more ridiculous.
A law requires presidents to transfer certain classified records by the end of their term. But few former presidents have made that deadline, and none have been prosecuted as a result. According to the National Archives and Records Administration, Trump's team has been cooperating. Congressman Michael Cloud with a group of Republicans met with former President Trump after the raid. We have the congressman here with us to discuss how that meeting went. Congressman Michael Cloud, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure thing. Good to be here.
Congressman, you've just come back from meeting with the former president, this amidst the fallout from his home being raided in Florida. How was the president, and what did he say to you?
Well, I can tell you this, he's no less discouraged to help the American people. If anything, this furthers the resolve that we see of how important it is that we push back on the corruption that's become entrenched in many of the agencies here in Washington, D.C., really to the disadvantage of the American people. You know, this is just so important. You know, people who are just trying to make ends meet, who are, you know, just working to get through the day, to put food on the table, to fill up their gas tank, to do these sorts of things. People who aren't necessarily watching the news and the trajectory of the FBI over the last several years, how partisan they've become, they get this. They get that, you know, this doesn't pass the sniff test by any sort of means, that we're raiding the house of a former president. This is the kind of thing that shouldn't be happening in the United States.
Congressman, you mentioned the evolution of the justice system over the past several years. Excuse me. Many are expressing great concern over the way this raid was conducted. Federal agents spent over 9 hours unaccompanied, carte blanche, in the former president's personal living quarters. Are concerns of planting evidence or even bugging the president's residence that we're hearing justified?
Yeah, certainly, obviously, we're concerned about and curious about what was taken out, and from an oversight perspective, but I'm also, you know, they were there for quite a while to take out a dozen boxes. What might have been left, we don't know, you know, and I'm not trying to point unfounded allegations at anybody, but we've seen from this FBI, we've seen them participate in the spreading of disinformation leading up to a presidential campaign. We've seen them, even before President Trump was in office, work to help spread this Russian collusion narrative. They participate in this, meanwhile turning a blind eye to the Hunter Biden story, calling it disinformation, and then turning a blind eye to what was going on in Hillary Clinton's having classified documents in a server on her home. And meanwhile, they're targeting parents at school board meetings, and what's going on. I mean, the American people are like rightfully not trusting of the FBI at this point. And so even if they come out with a reason, it's hard to take it at face value right now because, you know, what we've seen, the bad actions that have happened over the last several years.
Congressman, besides what we see on the surface, apparently this is about documents that were not returned by the president, which, by the way, there is precedent for taking no legal action, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. Why do you think we're seeing this type of unprecedented use of power on a former president of the United States?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of unprecedented action taken by the FBI regarding Donald Trump. And again, this goes back to before he was in office, this unprecedented, very circumstantial actions taken. Now, we've got a job as the Oversight Committee to push back on this and to really get to the bottom of what's going on and to help bring sunlight to the bad, corrupt actions that are going on, and then to work to get it out. And so already this week, the Oversight Committee, we sent a letter to the National Archives to preserve their records for anything involving this. We'll be looking into what's going on. We need to look at revising our House rules to allow for something called the Homan Rule that would allow us to zero out the budgets of individuals and bad actors in our government. We've got a lot of work to do to restore the trust of the American people in this government. Our whole foundation, our founding documents rest on the American people trusting this federal government to act justly, to act out of impartiality when it comes to these sorts of law enforcement sort of things. And we understand we're going to have honest disagreements over legislation and those kind of things, but this is not what we see going on. This is a corrupt politicization of law enforcement in our country, something that goes against everything that America is supposed to stand for.
Congressman Michael Cloud, thank you.
Thank you.
FBI Director Christopher Wray is condemning the recent online threats against him and other federal agents. This is after the agency raided former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida. Messages online included calls for federal agents and U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland to be assassinated. Wray also said that the men and women of law enforcement are people who make heroic sacrifices for all Americans. In response to the raid, Senator Rand Paul said the search could lead to Garland's impeachment. The senator urged an investigation to look into whether Garland misused his office. The DOJ has finally spoken on the raid of former President Trump's home in Palm Beach. This comes after calls from both prominent Democrats and Republicans to shed more light on the raid. NTD's Iris Tao is at the DOJ with more.
Days after the unprecedented Mar-a-Lago raid, the Justice Department breaks silence, saying it's seeking to unseal the search warrant. Here's Attorney General Merrick Garland.
Just now, the Justice Department has filed a motion in the Southern District of Florida to unseal a search warrant and property receipt relating to a court-approved search that the FBI conducted earlier this week.
And Garland confirmed that he personally approved the search warrant of Trump's home, but he took no questions from reporters and gave us very little explanation on why a raid was justified.
The search warrant was authorized by a federal court upon the required finding of probable cause.
Attorney General, the former president said this
FBI agents? Thank you all for your questions, but as I said, this is all I can say at this time.
Trump's lawyer says the warrant indicates the FBI was investigating the handling of classified materials. And while Garland says
all Americans are entitled to the even-handed application of the law,
Trump again blasted the raid on Thursday, revealing the FBI went through his wife's closets and saying the search came, quote, out of nowhere despite his team cooperating fully. And that's as GOP lawmakers react to Garland's statement, with Senator Lindsey Graham urging the DOJ to reveal the basis of the search, and Senator Marsha Blackburn questioning if Garland would personally approve a warrant to search Hunter Biden. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert is calling for peaceful action in response to the FBI raid of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. Gohmert, a Trump ally, says he is concerned that any violence could be used as an excuse to persecute conservatives. In a statement, Gohmert said, quote, "We have seen this before. They will use this to declare more emergencies, perhaps even take more of our liberties." Gohmert has been critical of the January 6th committee and Justice Department's treatment of protesters who breached the Capitol after the 2020 election. He added, quote, "Conservatives need to stay peaceful while verbally proclaiming the incredible abuses of these dictator wannabes." Gohmert's call for peace came after sharp criticism of the FBI as well as other agencies that, according to the congressman's statement, tried to prevent Trump's election and that attempted to remove him from office. President Biden and his immediate family flew to South Carolina to begin a week-long summer vacation. Biden, First Lady Jill Biden, his son Hunter, along with Biden's daughter-in-law Melissa Cohen and grandson Beau, traveled together by AirForce One. The Bidens are staying in a gated golf course community on Kiowa Island. According to a White House official, the vacation home belongs to a friend and has been used by the Bidens in previous visits. Having recently recovered from 2 rounds of the CCP virus, it's not clear if the president will continue to work during his vacation. The White House has previously said that the president is never truly free from the jobs and responsibilities he has. He'll continue to consult with aides and take his daily national security briefings, regardless of his location. There's an administrative push to change Title IX, but today in D.C., a group is speaking out against the efforts. They say the changes would strip rights and protections from many. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with more.
I'm here right outside of the Department of Education building in Washington, D.C., where a group of policy directors, attorneys, and more are pushing back against the Biden administration's efforts to reshape the way Title IX is interpreted. These people tell me that Title IX is being distorted in a way that infringes on the rights of individuals on many levels, including due process, free speech, and even the mental and spiritual health of each individual.
Well, we can't even talk basic truths, and then you can be harassed by school administrations because you're speaking biological truths. That's a problem.
The group is pushing back against a proposal to amend Title IX. Title IX is a 1972 civil rights law that prohibits sex-based discrimination in any education program that receives federal funding. Right now, the Department of Education aims to expand definitions of words like sex and sexual harassment in Title IX.
Expanding sex to include gender identity, and in so doing, gutting protections for women and girls.
The administration says the goal is to protect transgender individuals, but some who oppose this effort say it has much deeper and far-reaching implications.
Bureaucrats are threatening to defund schools and religious schools and take away the financial aid of religious Americans.
And some tell us the impacts could be even more grave than financial repercussions. They say normalizing transgender policies in schools will have lifelong consequences for kids who could start hormones as early as 8 years old.
When you put them on these puberty blockers, when you put them on this cross-sex hormones, it's permanent. And so they end up down that road, and that's where they have to go. I feel really bad for parents in this scenario, because when they go to a doctor and the doctor says, hey, your child is dealing with a gender dysphoria, we have to set them on this path. Otherwise, they might kill themselves. You know, that's really emotionally manipulative.
One civil rights attorney explains that the effects of this type of transgender policy push is being seen in other countries.
In the UK, the closure of the Tavistock Clinic, which had performed these surgeries, and the National Health Service had closed it based on the research that they had and the long-term health consequences, because these patients had their mental health still was not resolved.
Critics say changes to Title IX won't get at the root of the mental health issue.
People want to ignore the origin of the broken narratives and just, throw rainbows and glitter at everything. But there is an origin to these things. There's trauma often that is undergirding all of this. This is a spiritual battle. It's not just a matter of philosophy versus philosophy. I mean, we're going to the very core of who we are as human beings.
The group urges the public to visit the Federal Register and make a public comment on the proposed changes to Title IX. Public comments will end on September 12th. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.